Here is the story. Layla Shan ran in one shoe. The other had come off somewhere back on the mountain road. She wasn't sure when, wasn't sure where, and at this point wasn't sure it mattered. What mattered was the road. What mattered was forward. Her dress was the problem. 23 buttons down the back, her mother had said proudly, counting them the morning of the wedding as if buttons were an achievement. Now the hem was destroyed, mud dark and heavy against her ankles, and the dress was the reason she was moving at a walk instead of a run, which felt like a personal failure. She touched the side of her face without meaning to. She stopped doing that. The mountain air was cold for April. Below, through the tree line, the lights of the city sat like a problem she no longer had the instructions for. She had a plan. She'd had a plan since 6 o'clock that evening, sitting in a gilded bridal suite and realizing the plan her father had made for her entire life was not actually a plan. It was a sale. The plan was, get out. The part after that was less clear. She had been walking for 22 minutes when the headlights appeared behind her. She moved to the side of the road without looking back. People passed. That was what happened on roads. She kept walking. The car slowed. She kept walking. The car stopped. She stopped. The window came down and the men inside looked at her the way engineers look at a collapsed bridge, not with panic, not with pity, but with the kind of careful attention that comes before a decision. He had a clean face. Dark eyes. The kind of stillness that didn't look like calm so much as something that had learned to hold itself very still. He said, "You're going the wrong direction." Layla looked at him. She looked at the road ahead. She looked back at him. "I know," she said. "The city is behind you. I know that too." He waited. He was very good at waiting, she could tell already, the way some people are built for patience, the way others are built for speed. She said, "Are you going to offer me a ride or just confirm my poor navigation?" He reached over and opened the passenger door. She got in. Later, days later, when she had time and quiet to examine it, she would not be able to explain why she got in the car of a man she didn't know on a mountain road at 11 in the evening while wearing a ruined wedding dress. The best answer she had was, the alternative was the road. And the road went the wrong direction. He didn't speak for the first few minutes. Neither did she. The car moved smoothly downhill, and Layla looked out the window and catalogued, because cataloging was what she did when she was afraid and didn't want to be. One shoe missing. Dress ruined. Phone at 4% battery. No bag. She had left it because the bag had a tracker her father's assistant had installed 2 years ago that she had discovered 6 months ago and never said anything about because saying anything would have changed the count on the calendar she was quietly keeping. The math was not great. She was doing very well, all things considered. "Your name is Layla Shan," the man said. She turned to look at him. He said, "Your father is Edmund Shan, chairman of Shan Capital." A pause. Also chairman of several other things that don't have websites. The car was very quiet. "How do you know that?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Because your fiancé called 3 people when you left. I was one of them." She counted this. She sorted it. She looked at the road ahead and said, "Who are you?" "Nikolai Voss." The name meant something. She wasn't sure exactly what yet. It sat at the edge of her memory the way a name does when you've heard it in the wrong kind of sentence. Spoken quietly. In rooms where people lower their voices. She said, "Where are you taking me?" He said, "Somewhere your father can't reach." "That's not an address." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She looked at him again. He was watching the road. He had the profile of someone who had made a great number of serious decisions and was comfortable making another one right now. She faced forward. She did not ask him to stop the car. The compound was in the hills north of the city. Clean, expensive, and impersonal in the way of places where powerful people go when they don't want to be found, nothing on the walls, furniture chosen for quality rather than personality, a kitchen that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood function and had no particular feelings about warmth. A woman met them at the door, nodded to Nikolai, looked briefly at Layla's dress with the expression of someone professionally trained not to have expressions, and disappeared. Layla stood in the entrance hall and looked around. She was not a guest. She was also not a prisoner. It was a third thing. She didn't have the word for it yet. He said, "Sit down." Not unkind. Factual. She sat. He sat across from her at a table that was too large for two people, which she noticed because she noticed the proportions of rooms as a habit. There was a glass of water in front of her that she didn't remember being placed there. Room temperature. Which was correct, cold water after running caused cramps, and she had been doing something close to running for the better part of an hour. She looked at the glass. She thought, who taught him that? She thought, why do I care who taught him that? She wrapped both hands around it and looked at him instead. He said, "Your fiancé, Marcus Zhao, is a business associate of your father's. The arrangement between them, the one that resulted in tonight, is a debt settlement. Your father made it. He didn't tell you what you were settling." Layla said, "I know what I was settling." A pause. "How long have you known?" he asked. 4 months. He nodded, as if this confirmed something. She said, "What do you want?" "I want to offer you an alternative." "To what?" "To going back." He folded his hands on the table. "Zhao will not release the arrangement voluntarily. Your father cannot afford to buy it back, the numbers don't exist. The only way out is for the debt to be absorbed by someone who outranks Zhao in the relevant hierarchy." He paused. "That's me." She looked at him. "And what does that cost?" she said. "Marry me instead." The room was extremely quiet. Layla picked up the glass of water and drank half of it and set it down and said, "The math doesn't math." "The math is exact," he said. "You don't know me." "I know enough. You know my father's name and my fiancé's name and that I run in one shoe. That is not enough to base a marriage on. It's more than most people start with." She stared at him. He looked back at her with that same careful attention, the bridge assessment, the pre-decision stillness, and she had the disorienting sense that he had already run every calculation she was currently running and had arrived at the same answer a few minutes ahead of her. She said, "I need to think." He said, "You have 4 days. After that, Zhao resurfaces, and my offer becomes more complicated." He stood up. "The room at the end of the hall is yours," he said. "There's a door at the back of the compound. It's unlocked. You can leave tonight if you want. I won't stop you." She looked at him. He meant it. That was the strange thing. She could see that he meant it, and somehow that made everything more difficult, because it meant the decision was actually hers. She didn't leave. She told herself it was strategic. She told herself she was assessing the situation, gathering information, making a rational choice about her options. She told herself this approximately 16 times over the first 2 days, and it was mostly true, and also not the whole truth, and she knew the difference and set it aside. Nikolai Voss moved through the compound like a man who had long ago finished making peace with who he was. He worked in the early mornings. He answered his phone in a language she didn't recognize once, and in perfect Mandarin twice. He ate at regular hours. He didn't make her talk. She found that last part unexpectedly restoring. On the second day she discovered the study. She wasn't looking for it, she was looking for a room with better light, because the architect in her had opinions about north-facing windows and this compound had a surplus of them. The study had one east-facing window and a desk and books organized by subject rather than aesthetics, which told her something about him, and a shelf along the far wall. On the shelf, face down, was a photograph. She didn't know why she righted it. It was a reflex. Face-down photographs bothered her the way unlevel frames bothered her, a small wrong thing that her hands corrected before her brain approved it. A woman. Older. The same jaw as Nikolai, the same quality of stillness, even in a photograph, even clearly laughing at whoever was behind the camera. Layla heard him come in. She didn't turn around. He stopped. She felt the change in the room, the particular quiet of a person seeing something they didn't expect. She said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "It's all right." She put the photograph back, upright, and turned around. He was looking at it, not at her. She said, "Who is she?" He said, "My mother." She waited. He didn't add anything. She said, is she? He said, yes. One word. She counted what it cost him. It wasn't nothing. She said, I'm sorry. He said, it was a long time ago. Flat. Careful. Neither of them believed it was long enough. They both knew this. Neither of them said so. They had dinner at opposite ends of the too large table and did not speak, and it was somehow the most honest meal she'd shared with another person in 3 years. On the 4th morning she went looking for him. This felt important, that she went to find him, rather than waiting to be found. She located him in the kitchen, which surprised her. He was making coffee with the focused attention he gave everything, and he looked up when she came in but didn't speak. She said, I understand what I get out of this. Tell me what you get. He set the coffee down. Zhao respects contract over everything else, he said. A legal marriage makes you mine in the only language he listens to. That means he cannot touch you without touching me. He paused. And touching me is something he has decided, several times, not to do. She said, that's not all of it. He looked at her for a moment. A long moment. No, he said. It isn't. He didn't say the rest. But she heard it anyway, in the space where the rest of the sentence would have been. She heard something she hadn't heard in a very long time. Not a transaction. Not a plan. Something smaller and more difficult, which was simply that he had looked at a woman running down a mountain road in one shoe and made a decision that had nothing to do with his business interests. She thought about her father, who had made every decision in her life with a calculator and no remainder. She thought about Marcus Zhao, who had smiled at her across a dinner table 6 months ago and known exactly what she was and said nothing. She thought about the photograph, face down on a shelf, and the one word Nikolai had used, and the way he had left it upright when she placed it that way, and then set it back down in the morning, not because he didn't want to see it, but because wanting to see it was something he carried privately, and this compound was where he was private. She said, I have conditions. He said, tell me. She told him. The list was reasonable. It was also a test, and also the most honest she'd been out loud in 3 years. She told him she would not disappear into his world entirely. She had her work, her designs, 3 projects mid-construction that had her name on them. She told him she would need to know, always, what was happening and why. She told him she would not be managed. He agreed to each one without negotiating. This unsettled her more than resistance would have. She said, you're agreeing very quickly. He said, I don't need you smaller than you are. That's not what this is. She looked at him. She said, I'll need that in writing. He almost smiled. It was the first time she'd seen anything close to it, a small movement at the corner of his mouth, there and then not, like a door briefly opened. The paperwork arrives this afternoon, he said. It did. She read it twice, slowly, at the east-facing window in the study. Her conditions were written in, every one of them, precise and legally binding. The Asset Protection Clause. The Professional Autonomy Clause. And one she hadn't asked for, an Exit Clause. Clear, fair, and entirely in her favor. She looked up. He was at the door. She said, you put in an exit clause. He said, of course. She said, I didn't ask for one. No, he said. But you should have one. She looked back down at the paper. She thought about the word that had been used to describe her for the entirety of her engagement: asset, arrangement, settlement, transfer. All nouns. All belonging to someone else's sentence. She picked up the pen on the desk. It was a very good pen. Heavy, balanced, the kind of pen a person buys because they sign things that matter. She thought, what kind of man owns a pen like this? She signed. The car was the same car. Matte black, no plates she'd ever recognized. She was in different clothes now, his, technically, because nothing in the compound was hers and he had left a folded set outside her door at 6 in the morning without a word, and she had put them on without comment because the dress was in a bin and that was fine, that was correct, some things should be left behind. She still had one shoe. She hadn't explained this. He hadn't asked. The road uncurled down the mountain, and the city came back into view below them, closer now, familiar in a way it hadn't felt in years. Her phone had been charged. Her 3 project files had been emailed to herself with notes. She had called no one, and no one she wanted to hear from had called her. Her father had called 11 times. She had watched the screen go dark 11 times. On the 12th, she had turned the phone face down on the table. Not the way the photograph was face down, that was grief, and she recognized grief. This was different. This was a door she was closing from the inside, her hand on the handle, her choice about when. She looked out the window at the city lights. She thought about load-bearing walls, about how the first question in any structure is not what looks good but what holds everything else up. She thought about how she had spent 3 years in a life that was beautiful and had no load-bearing walls, and how she had known this and smiled across dinner tables anyway, because the calendar was running and the count was almost done. She thought, the count is done. The car turned onto the main road. The mountain disappeared behind them. She thought the math was starting to math. She didn't say this out loud. She looked at the road instead, and the city, and the small distant lights of it all. Nikolai drove. He didn't speak. He was very good at silence, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, that sat between 2 people without pressure. She thought, that is a rare thing. She thought, I know what load-bearing looks like. She put her window down slightly. The April air was warmer now, coming off the city. She let it move through the car. For the first time in a very long time, the road was going the right direction. And she knew exactly where.